All right, cool. So why am I talking about this today? There are, to me, two reasons. One is that I have seen too many IoT devices, IoT solutions that just had a short lifetime for many different reasons, right? And I believe in many cases this is the way the IoT application has been designed, the wrong way if you want, right? The second reason is, let me see if that works. There we go. So the second reason is that I'm in the IoT space now for almost 25 years. Oh, that was not supposed to happen? Okay, cool. So when I started in 2001, I joined a company called Prosys Software. Prosys Software was, let's say, a vendor of IoT embedded middleware. We had a device management platform, and we were also extremely good in software updates and so on. And back in the days, we focused specifically, I would say, on connected home, and we were really one of the few vendors, right? The term IoT just came later in the time, right? So in like 2005, you started seeing it in the scientific community, right? And what we did was, let's say, an open standards-based IoT platform. And that was not really appreciated by everybody, right? So we were also talking to a lot of car OEMs back in the days, right? And I mean, to them, it was like something evil. I don't want to have an open platform, right? Because what happens if, let's say, a third-party code, does something to my vehicle? Who is liable, right? Then, I mean, like I said, our IoT platform was based on Java OSGI, right? So Java in 2001 was not easy to sell on embedded devices, to call it like this, right? And what I felt also, everybody was looking for the killer application, right? So, SMS in mind, I want to do something similar. And I mean, that, also raised lots of issues, right? Because, I mean, because of not finding, let's say, a killer application, there were not, investments were not made, right? Or we also had lots of cases, yeah, where, the product was being developed more or less ready to go, right? But then to launch the product, to bring it to market was too much of a business risk, if you want, right? So they basically stopped it. And in some way, I would say, right, so we were offering a solution to a problem that did not exist, right? So that's sort of, where I'm coming from. So this, let's say, was our first customer deployment. Customer was, funnily enough, Bosch Siemens Home Appliances, right? So what we had is, you can see it in the middle, this gateway that was connecting different home appliances via power line, let's say, modem, right? We already had web-based browsers, or WebPad browsers, if you want, right? So like tablet kind of devices, right? And you could also manage your home appliances by your phone. I mean, we didn't have smartphones, but we had WAP back in the days, right? So it was not as nice of a user experience, but you could do it, right? And I mean, we used also our remote management platform to, let's say, manage devices remotely. I mean, just to this was 2001, right? And in my opinion, right, so I mean, except maybe power line, what you wouldn't use anymore, right? It doesn't look so much different what we do today, right? So I mean, like on a high level, right? So when I was at Prosys, right, so we have always, and this is true also for Bosch, to be honest, right? We have always been advocates for open standards. And in the core, our platform was Java OSGI based, and I will say a little bit more about OSGI, what it is about, right? But we were also active in many other standardization bodies. So maybe to highlight, the Eclipse Foundation, where, let's say we also drive a lot of open source activities in the IoT working group, but also Eclipse, the IDE, was built in the core on the OSGI platform. So this plug-in mechanism is based on OSGI. So we always had this sort of relationships. And there are many other standards bodies that would go too far to go into, but the core message is, right, so we have always been believer in like, a standards approach. All right, so OSGI, let's say, was something that started, I think, 1999, if I'm not mistaken. So I was not with POSIS when it started. But in essence, it was like, modularity for Java. So if you're aware of Java, right, so you have your, let's say, Java environment, you can run application at a time if you want, right? With OSGI, we introduced modularity, and we could run multiple applications in one instance, right? So, and OSGI was designed, I would say, very generically, that you could use it, obviously, in IoT deployments, but it has also been heavily used in Java enterprise application servers and in other scenarios, right? So, so what it's really about is like, being able to dynamically manage the life cycle of your application so that you could start and stop them whenever you wanted. You could install them, uninstall them, and all the mechanisms were standardized. And it was, obviously, because it was Java, it was portable, and it was, if you do it right, designed to be able to reuse components, right? Meaning, if you have, for example, let's say a telematics platform, right? So you are an OEM, and you have many different vehicles, you might be able to reuse 60–70% of your code, and the rest is then, vehicle specific. So there's a lot of benefit if you, design it properly, right? So this is how OSGI, let's say, also again on a very, very high level looks like, right? So you have, your Java runtime environment, right? Let's say, our components, we call them bundles, right? And a bundle, let's say, has, dependencies, right? So let's say you write an application and you want to use a Java logging framework. You could, let's say, define the dependency to the Java logging framework, and you could even say, like, I have a dependency to a specific version of a logging framework, right? And if you, let's say, design this again properly, right, this will help you to ensure that the system is stable, also over a long life cycle, right? So typically, when customers approached us, right, so their requirements were about, obviously, scalability, right, modularity, and reuse of code. Then lifecycle management, they also wanted to be independent of the hardware, and also, I mean, back in the days, C++, writing code in C++ was not like, as easy as it is today, in Golang or in Rust, for example, right? This dependency management was obviously, very important, right? So if you deploy or if you perform a software update of your application, and you have, for example, this dependency to a specific version of the logging framework, and when you deploy the new version, this dependency cannot be resolved, you don't install it, right? In order to, ensure that your platform is still running. Obviously, dynamical behavior, applications, devices can come and go anytime, and you need to be able to manage this properly. Application isolation, right? So what you know also from Android, for example, right? So, I mean, we basically did the same. It all runs like, in one Java environment, but with like, access rights and all this. You could basically isolate applications from each other so that they couldn't, interact if you want, right? Resource management was a very big topic, right? So, I mean, like I said, Java embedded devices, so resources were always, not enough to call it like this. So we had many mechanisms, like lazy initialization, for example, that you boot up let's say, the Java environment, the OSGI core stack, and then, let's say over time, you load the other applications. So they are seen as active, they are there, right? But they are not really using memory, for example. And obviously future-proof and extendable. So that's sort of what we did. So then 2015 Bosch acquired ProSys, right? And also then a lot of things have changed. I just wanted to mention this year, so in 2019 we had about 620 IoT platforms according to IoT Analytics, right? I mean, IoT, you could really find it in every domain. It was not only smart home anymore or smart building, it was like everywhere, right? I would say we were all under the impression that, the cloud IoT platforms will dominate the world, right? Which didn't happen. We had very fragmented vision of, what an ecosystem should look like. The complexity was also growing by merging, different industries, if you want, right? And what I also felt is that, standards are sort of, seen as secondary, right? So cost and speed was prioritized over longevity, right? So at least that's, how I felt, many solutions were developed. And yeah, obviously privacy, security, as of today, were then also a major concern still. So why IoT solutions must adopt faster than ever, right? So I think there are lots of drivers of change. One is evolving legislation, right? So at some point, we had to deal with GDPR. Then, the AI Act, let's say, is coming to effect, right? The Cyber Resilience Act, right? So that has a lot of effects, yeah, on, the devices we have in the field. AI is changing the game, right? So we gain more insight that we can use to improve our applications or improve user experience and so on, right? Yeah, there is obviously, since we have this, typical app ecosystem, there's always an expectation that, applications evolve, right? So that is true also for IoT kind of employments. Then there are lots of implications, in my opinion, that need to be taken into account when we design IoT solutions. Sovereignty matters, right? So meaning, the geopolitical tensions, yeah, they have, or they are a decision factor, I would say, to some extent, in how we design, right? Be it that we don't want to use, for example, chipsets, out of, China, for example, or who knows what happens when, there are being tariffs for, software coming from US and so on, right? So I think, these are all decision factors that we need to take into account, and we need to, have answers for it, right? Yeah, and then design for flexibility, longevity, right? So, I mean, ensure compliance, ensure scalability, resilience, yeah, for long-lasting applications in the end. So, okay, ecosystem awareness. I think it's also it's a thing. When we start an IoT solution, IoT device. I mean, what is my place in the ecosystem? Am I just a device provider? Am I, the ecosystem driver and so on, right? I can also have obviously multiple roles and multiple ecosystems, but again, is a decision factor on how to design applications. IoT solutions should never be isolated, right? So in the sense that you can only work, let's say in a specific ecosystem, right? So because then you limit your market. If you ask me, standards are very important, right? So they matter, but there are also lots of standards where the IP is controlled by large corporations. So, I mean, choosing the right standards is obviously key to call it like this. There are lots of proven standards that exist for some time, right? And I think open source, we should, use, what is coming, the innovation that is coming out of there, but there are also challenges with it in terms of, for example, fragmentation, right? So when the ecosystem grows, you will have to face this, let's say, issue, to call it like this. All right, so last couple of seconds. So design principles, obviously modularity matters, I would say, right? Dynamic lifecycle management is something you should take into account, right? So, and again, all the implications, right? So applications can come and can go. Service orientation, right? So, like I said, OSGI is a service-oriented architecture for Java, right? APIs should be, stable, right? So this, in my opinion, is a complete no-go, right? What you see from many large corporations, right? So they provide a piece of software, but the API changes over time again and again. Android is a good example, for example. And that has a lot of effects on the community, that has a lot of effects on, the customers, so that should be, controlled. Versioning compatibility, right? So I mean, when you design your application and let's say you improve it, right? You always should take care, and this was something, we did in OSGI, that, your software is backward compatible. Governance and discipline, right? So I mean, I feel like, when you build an ecosystem, there needs to be a strong governance to ensure stable APIs, to have predictable services and so on, and prevent API chaos. And there are probably many, many more things, we could do to make it even better, but this would be, at least, some of the recommendations that, from the history of 25 years where we did, IoT applications, that I would recommend. And just to mention it, so our IoT platform, the embedded IoT middleware and the device management that I mentioned earlier, they still exist. We still offer them to our customers without redesigning it, and that's only because of doing it the right way. And with this, I would close my presentation. Thank you very much.